Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric, our continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's been 48 hours since we talked about Nintendo 64, so you know we gotta talk about it all over again, because Robert FPGAZumSpass is hard at work updating the cores, and we got some new playable games, as well as some retests on games that have seen improvements since the last time we talked about them, that you guys have asked to be reshown. But right off the top, Mischief Makers now works on the current core. This worked last video as well, but I had to cut it for time. But I know so many people absolutely love this game, and it is one of the few true 2D games on the Nintendo 64, because the hardware was so oriented towards being a 3D console, we didn't get that many 2D experiences on the actual hardware, so Mischief Makers definitely leaves us as one of those games that shows off what the Nintendo 64 could do when 2D is utilized. Now be aware that this does work, the gameplay is there, and graphically it looks good, but you are going to be seeing some glitches here and there, including that weird blue block at the bottom left hand corner. Some sprites are just going to phase in and out of existence randomly, but I would say like this is 95% of the way to actually working. Now, if you've never played Mischief Makers before, it's probably got one of the most difficult control schemes on the Nintendo 64. It takes a lot of time to learn what the game's asking of you, but once you actually get it down, it does become a little bit seamless. But if you didn't notice right there, one of those creepy looking sprites just phased out of existence. And I would say for a game that's so bright, colorful, and cheery, Mischief Makers actually is relatively creepy. All of these faces look like they're in pain just hanging out in the game world. It's always been one of those things that's been a little bit disconcerting to me. But this is a game that so many people were waiting to have come alive on the Nintendo 64 core, and with the current core updates, it does definitely work. Now, as far as my knowledge is concerned, no one has actually beaten this yet, so it's not a game that I would say would be completable until someone tells me otherwise, but it is a game that you can start playing, and you'll see right there, those sprites do like to pop in and out depending on where you're moving around. It's not perfect yet, but it's definitely a lot better than not playable whatsoever, which is where the core was previously. So it is just nice to be able to have another game, especially one as beloved as Mischief Makers, because again, even though the Nintendo 64 was well known for its 3D capabilities, having better technical 3D than either the PlayStation 1 or the Saturn, we really didn't get that many 2D games on the hardware, so whatever you do get, you get to enjoy, experience, and play around with, and you can do a lot worse than Mischief Makers. I just love what this game does. It's weird, it's quirky, it's colorful, it's unique, and it's unlike anything else on the hardware, and today, you can just 100% play it. And you will see here on the little intro, amazing 2D artwork, but there are a couple of glitches in the sprites, so if you do decide to play Mischief Makers, just be aware, it's well known about, and I'm sure it'll get updated soon. So moving directly into the full 3D realm, we have Mega Man 64, which was actually playable a few cores ago. I had it on my list of games to feature, and I'm just getting around to doing it now, because a lot of you guys have been asking if this works. It's definitely a classic game from the era, and I do love the Mega Man Legends series. I think it's weird that they switched the game over to Mega Man 64 versus Legends on Nintendo 64, but I really don't know what Capcom was thinking there. This is definitely the least of the Mega Man Legends games. They get a lot better from here, but this is still an absolute classic, and seeing it on the Nintendo 64 core is awesome with all of those different VI effects turned on. It definitely takes a little bit to get used to the controls because you're rotating the camera around in real time, so it is kind of antiquated in that respect. Once you get a hang of it, it is a totally fun game with a really good adventure, and it is another game that you can 100% play on the current core. And if you've never played Mega Man Legends before, tell me down below, because I feel like not a lot of people actually got to experience this series back in the day. I had it on PlayStation 1, I have all the games on disc, and I do absolutely love it and really wish we'd gotten that Mega Man Legends 3 Capcom was promising us. But this game has a very unique artistic graphical style, and I think it actually translates extremely well over to the Nintendo 64. The VI filtering and anti-aliasing actually make Mega Man 64 look better on this hardware than they did on the PlayStation 1 in my opinion, but you can tell me down below what you think. And again, this was one of the viewer request tests, so if you have any game you want to see featured on these testing videos, just leave me a comment down below and tell me, and I am sure I will get to it eventually. But you'll see here, the robot is about ready to explode. He is not happy, but this game has some really interesting sound and music as well, and it does sound really good in the current core. So go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds or so, and I'll come back and show you more games that just work on the current core. Enjoy!
Look at that sky. Well, I have to say it after being underground for so long. I wonder where Roll went. Wait. More?
It sounds exactly like it should on a Nintendo 64, but if you're wondering why it sounds a little bit muffled or low bitrate, that's just because on a lot of cross-platform games, the audio had to be heavily compressed to fit on the Nintendo 64 cartridge. So in games, if you haven't played them for a long time and you think the audio sounds a little bit muffled or a little bit distant, that's usually just down to the encoding format they used to compress those audio samples and get them down onto cartridge. But as we get out into the open world here, this looks really good on the Nintendo 64. I appreciate what the PlayStation 1 does with all sorts of better audio, better music, and a lot better sounding voice clips. But I do still think, at least in this one instance, Nintendo 64 definitely has the better look as far as cross-platform games are concerned. And this is just an awesome game. If you've never played Mega Man Legends or Mega Man 64, definitely check it out. It is a longer game, so I'm not sure if you can complete it on the current core, but it does let you talk to a dog named Paprika, and that is worth its weight in gold as far as video games are concerned. Just wish you could pet the dog. Now moving on to a game that everyone wanted me to retest, and I was happy to do so because it is one of my favorite racing games on the hardware, is California Speed. This game has seen massive improvement since the last time I showed it to you on this video series. There is definite graphical corruption. A lot of the buildings on the edges of the screen were either popping in and out of existence or basically didn't look like they should. But now this game is running at full speed, it's fluid, the controls are perfect, the sound is exactly what it should be. This just seems like a one-to-one recreation of the California Speed Nintendo 64 game, which I haven't played in a while because I usually play the arcade version of this game. But if you love California Speed on the Nintendo 64, make sure you do play the arcade version as well because both have exclusive tracks that only either the arcade or the console have. So even though this is definitely not as good of a port as I wish it was, it's still an awesome game on the Nintendo 64. And it does have exclusive tracks, and the amount of improvement here is huge. But watch these walls right now. I know a lot of you like to see the difference between filtering on and filtering off, and I like to kind of pivot around and show you what games look like with different features enabled. Right now you're watching the entire VI pipeline as well as texture filtering enabled on the core, and I'm going to switch out to it right now. You'll see the pixels on the skybox get pretty big, but honestly the road and the course itself don't look too bad. But as things get closer to the camera, that pixelation becomes a little bit too heavy. You'll see this mountain with the lava coming down looks a bit of a mess, so we'll switch right back into the full VI implementation. This is a game in which I think all of the different filtering options and that visual pipeline in the back end of the hardware really do sell the image and overall vibe of California Speed better. But that still is the great thing about the core. We can toggle options on and off all day long, but I know there's a lot of debate between team filtering and team unfiltered, so tell me down below again what you think about that California Speed example. But if you've never played this game before and you're testing the current Nintendo 64 core, just throw it on. It's an absolute wild arcade game. It is over the top. It's basically San Francisco Rush, except set in the state of California and not in the city of San Francisco. And honestly, you could do a lot worse than that. Now, another game that's seen a lot of improvement since the last time I tested it, and a game that pretty much everyone asked for, is WWF WrestleMania 2000. Last time we played this game, the speed was definitely a little bit slower than real hardware, and it had some glitches in the overall polygon models of the wrestlers as well as the audience with those sprites. And now, outside of the menu area, this game looks pretty much spot on. In the menus, there's definitely some text missing, but when you get into the actual game, everything is rendering correctly, the crowd is there, the audience, the ring, everything is just looking like it should. And again, this is just one of the best wrestling games of all time, in my opinion. There were so many amazing games on the Nintendo 64 as far as wrestling was concerned. It really was the golden era of these type of games. Sure, they haven't aged visually as well as modern titles, but the mechanics, the engine, and everything, I 100% understand why absolutely everyone and their mother wants to see previews of these games. So I'm definitely here to tell you it is 100% improved over the last time we saw it. You can get matches in, you can play with friends. It is the game that you remember, and it is good as you remember it. I will say the audio quality is quite muffled because the sound samples are compressed, so go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds to get a feel, and I'll be right back. Now, if you can't tell there, the actual music sounds high quality, but the sound effects, like the rock there getting knocked over onto the canvas, those are definitely feeling like they're too distant, but that's just part of the game. And I do get a lot of questions as to why some games sound muffled like that, and it's just one of those things. The Nintendo 64 had very limited storage on its cartridges, 64 megabytes being the biggest you could have versus 700 megabytes over on the PlayStation 1 or Saturn. You're just going to end up with situations like that. But another game that has been promoted to working is Extreme G2. We've already talked about the original game on this channel, but now we have the sequel right here. And in my opinion, the original is definitely better than the sequel, but tell me down below which one you prefer. But it's always awesome to have another working game on the core, and I would say at least graphically, this one is doing a lot more heavy lifting than the original game. These pseudo lighting effects on the wall, and then when we actually get into the stage, you're going to see all these lightning strikes that are basically coloring the skybox. It's a really good look. It's a ton of fun. You'll see here that we're just competing with no other real players on the screen though, and big thanks to Andy D for getting a few of the captures for this video. He sent me the notes over about the frame rate. You're going to see right now the game is running smooth, it's fluid, everything seems exactly as you would expect. But when I go over to actual races with other opponents in the video, you're going to see that the frame rate does struggle. Definitely still needs a little bit of improvement, but honestly, sometimes the Nintendo 64 just struggled because it's the Nintendo 64. Some people will say, why is the frame rate so low in a certain game? That's what it was on original hardware. This was not the 60 frame per second error for every single game. Some games are basically slideshows, so you do need to check to see whether the core is just running slow or if the game just ran slow back in the day. But honestly, it is fun to have another game. This one's definitely a good one. Go ahead and listen to the audio for like 35 seconds, but watch the frame rate. You should see a difference, and I'll be right back. So when you have CPU controlled opponents on the same course, the frame rate definitely lowers, but I need to pop my original cartridge into my Nintendo 64 and check to see how it works in real hardware, because I would be curious. Now, a game that everyone is curious about, and I wanted to feature it again because you love seeing it tested, is Killer Instinct Gold. You are still not going to be playing this game, but it is getting into game way more consistently, but now it's doing this really interesting thing. We're going to pick Saberwolf here, and you're going to go down and see the opponent we're supposed to be fighting. She loads in Maya quickly and then turns into Saberwolf again. It's a really strange glitch, but it's kind of fun, and next time Killer Instinct does something different, I will show you. And one widescreen example, because you guys seem to be really into these widescreen patches and capabilities. Watching Super Mario 64 in widescreen is a total vibe, and I 100% love it. It is just the same game you know, love, and remember, but you get to see it in a different way. And I know a lot of people are going to be playing a lot of games that are available in widescreen on the core that way, because it really does look great on a modern television, especially with the internal scaler on the MiSTer itself. It's just a new way to play a game, and that's always a fun time. Obviously, MiSTer with the FPGA core for Nintendo 64 is already a new way to play the games you know, love, and remember, but you really can't do a ton of widescreen on the hardware without a lot of different trickery, but here we have a much easier way to do it, and it's just so much fun to see the world of Super Mario 64 in 16:9. It gives it a breath of fresh air, and it really does make it feel like seeing the game for the first time in some ways. It's definitely not going to make you forget your first playthrough and feel like this is the first time you've played the game, but honestly, it enhances just enough. And you see here, as we're on this pillar, you just get a better view of what's going on around you, whether you're outdoors in big open areas or you're inside in these more confined corridors. It does just have a nice look to it no matter what you're doing, and it is just fun to have this capability, and that's what I love about fan mods, different patches, MiSTer, everything like this. Fans take their time to recreate something or to improve something that they remember and loved back in the day, and you get to play a new version of it. And on that topic, if there's any fan ROMs that you want to see featured on the testing videos, leave me comments down below. I'm going to admit that I'm not 100% up on the current fan patches and mods. I have tried a few, some have shown up on the channel and some don't currently run. But if there is a fan mod or a ROM hack that you want to see tested, just tell me down below and I will try to get to it. But if you want to play Super Mario 64 in widescreen on MiSTer FPGA today, you can do it. You can finish the game, you can 120 star it, you can do whatever you want. But that is the current set of tests for the current MiSTer core on the Nintendo 64. Yeah, there's so many new games that are just working right now. We've gotten like 8 or 9 games in the last week that didn't used to work and you can now play. And next time the core gets updated, I'll definitely do another video, but I'm thinking about doing that analog video talking about the different visual settings and how they look on a CRT, so look forward to that one shortly. It is just a lot harder to film on camera. But short of that, Nintendo 64 keeps getting better. You should definitely be playing it tonight, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.